A lone canoe cuts through the mist on a quiet lake. The water is still. The sky is gray. A man sits in the back, wrapped in a white cloth. His face is painted with red ochre. He does not speak. Around him, tall trees rise like walls. The air is thick with the smell of wet earth and old stone. This is Tayasal, the last Maya kingdom. It is the year 1697. For over 200 years, the Spanish have taken land, burned temples, and silenced voices. Yet here, in this hidden place, the Maya still speak their language. They still pray to their gods. They still remember who they are. No one in Europe knows this place exists. No Spanish priest has set foot here in decades. No soldier has raised a flag. The world believes the Maya are gone, but they are not. They are waiting. This is the story of how one small kingdom held on when all others fell. It is a story of courage, silence, and survival. It is also a story of resistance, not with swords, but with silence, not with war, but with memory. To understand Tayasal, we must go back. Long before the Spanish came, the Maya built cities in the jungle. They studied the stars. They carved stone. They wrote books. Their kings ruled with power and wisdom. But by the 1500s, their world was breaking. Wars, droughts, famine. Then came the Spanish. In 1517, Spanish ships landed on the Yucatan coast. They brought horses, guns, and disease. They claimed the land for Spain. They said their God was the only true God. They burned Maya books. They forced people to kneel. One by one, the great cities fell: Tikal, Calakmul, Chichen Itza. By 1546, most of the northern Yucatan was under Spanish control. But not all Maya people gave in. Some ran, some fought, some hid. In the deep south, in the forests and lakes of what is now Guatemala and Belize, Maya groups stayed free. Among them was the Itza people. They lived on an island in Lake Petén Itza. Their city was called Noche Petén. The Spanish called it Tayasal. For 150 years, Tayasal remained untouched. No Spanish soldier had ever crossed the lake. No priest had baptized its people. No governor had claimed it. How did this happen? How did one small kingdom survive when all others fell? The answer lies in three things: geography, strategy, and silence. The land around Tayasal was hard to reach. Thick jungle, swamps, no roads. The lake was wide and deep. The island was small but strong. The Itza built walls. They had canoes. They watched the shores. Any stranger who came was seen at once. But more than walls, the Itza used time. They did not rush. They did not attack. They waited. When the Spanish messengers sent, the Itza listened. They spoke politely. They offered gifts, but they never promised to obey. They said they would think. Then they waited and waited. The Spanish grew tired. They left. Years passed. Then the Spanish came again. The same thing happened. This was not luck. It was a plan. The Itza had seen what happened to others. They knew the Spanish took land. They knew they killed kings. They knew they changed names and gods. So the Itza chose a different path. They did not fight openly. They did not sign treaties. They did not surrender. But they did not attack either. They stayed. This was their strategy: to be just out of reach, just out of sight, just out of time. Now, in 1697, that time is ending. A Spanish captain named Martín de Ursúa is building boats on the edge of the jungle. He has soldiers, he has guns, he has orders from the King of Spain. He will cross the lake. He will take the island. He will end the last Maya kingdom. But on the island, the people do not panic. They light fires, they sharpen spears, they whisper old prayers. They know what is coming, and they are ready. This is not the end of their story. It is the final moment of a long fight. A fight not for victory, but for dignity. A fight to say, we were here, we are still here. And so, as the mist lifts on Lake Piten Itza, we begin. Long before the Spanish came, the Maya were not one kingdom. They were many, dozens of city-states, each with its own king, each with its own temple, each with its own story. These cities were not in the deep jungle. They were in the open. Tikal stood in a clearing. Calakmul rose from red earth. Copan sat by a river. These were not hidden places. They were centers of power. Kings ruled from tall pyramids. Priests studied the sky. Farmers grew maize, beans, and squash. The Maya wrote in books made of bark paper. They used a system of dots and bars for numbers. They knew the length of the year better than the Europeans did. They could predict eclipses. They built calendars that ran for thousands of years.
But by the 900s, something changed. The great cities were abandoned. No one knows why. Some say the soil failed, some say there was war, some say too many people lived in one place. Whatever the cause, the cities fell silent. The pyramids were covered by vines, the books were lost. Yet the people did not vanish. They moved. They lived in smaller towns. They kept their language. They kept their gods. They remembered the old ways. When the Spanish arrived in 1517, they found Maya people still farming, trading, and praying. But the great days were gone. The cities were ruins. The kings had no armies. The Spanish did not come in peace. They came with swords. They came with fire. They came with a cross in one hand and a sword in the other. In 1524, a Spanish captain named Pedro de Alvarado marched into Guatemala. He fought the Quiche Maya. He won. He burned their temples. He took their gold. He told them to serve the King of Spain and worship the Christian God. Other Spanish captains did the same. In Yucatan, Francisco de Montejo tried to take the land. He failed at first. The Maya fought back. But the Spanish had guns, they had horses, they had disease. Smallpox killed more people than swords did. In some villages, half the people died. In others, 9 out of 10. The survivors were weak. They could not fight. By 1546, the Spanish controlled most of northern Yucatan. They built towns. They forced people to live in them. They called these towns reducciones. They said it was for safety, but it was also control. Priests came next. They learned the Maya language. They baptized children. They destroyed idols. They said the old gods were false. They said the Maya must forget their past. But not all Maya people obeyed. Some ran into the forest. Some went to the mountains. Some crossed rivers into unknown lands. Among them were the Itza. The Itza were not from the north. They were from the south. They were a proud group. They spoke a Mayan language called Itzael. They remembered the old kings and did not trust the Spanish. They moved deep into the Petén region. It was a land of lakes and trees, no roads, no bridges, just water and green. They chose an island in Lake Petén Itza. It was small, but it was safe. They called it Nudge Petén, Great Island. They built homes, they planted maize, they raised families. They also built walls, they placed guards, they kept canoes ready. They knew the Spanish would come, but they also knew the land. The jungle was their ally, the lake was their shield. For years, the Spanish tried to find them. In 1544, a captain named Andres Diaz tried. He got lost. His men died of hunger. He turned back. In 1618, 2 Franciscan priests, Juan de Orbita and Pedro de Lison, arrived at the edge of the lake. They wanted to preach. The Itza allowed them to come, but only under rules. The priests could not stay long, they could not destroy idols, they could not baptize without permission. The Itza listened to their words, but they did not change their gods. One chief said, "We will think about your God, but we cannot forget our own." The priests left. They said the Itza were stubborn, but they were not violent. In 1619, the same priests returned. This time the Itza seemed more open. They let the priests build a small chapel. They even allowed some baptisms. But it did not last. Soon the chapel was burned. The crosses were broken. The priests were told to leave. No one knows who gave the order, but the message was clear. You are not welcome here. The Spanish were angry, but they did not attack. The journey was too hard. The cost was too high. So, the Itza stayed. They traded with other Mayan groups. They got salt, they got cloth, they gave honey, they gave feathers. They also sent spies. They learned what was happening in the Spanish towns. They knew when soldiers moved. They knew when priests planned trips. They used silence as a weapon. They did not boast. They did not send threats. They simply existed. And in that silence, they survived.
But the world was changing. By the late 1600s, Spain wanted full control of the Americas. They could not allow a free Maya kingdom in the middle of their claimed land. Reports reached the capital in Mérida. Tayasal still stands. The Itza still rule. They do not obey. A decision was made. Tayasal must fall. But how? The land was hard. The people were alert. The lake was wide. The Spanish would need a new plan. They would need boats. They would need time. They would need a leader. His name was Martín de Ursúa, and he was coming. The Itza did not live in fear, but they were not blind. They knew the Spanish were strong. They knew their guns made thunder. They knew their horses ran like wind. They knew their priests spoke of a God who punished. But the Itza also knew something the Spanish did not. Time. Time could be used like a shield. A promise could be made today and broken tomorrow. A meeting could be delayed for months. A request could be answered with silence. This was the way of the Itza. They did not hate the Spanish. They did not love them. They saw them as a force, like a storm, like a flood. It would come, it would pass, or it would not. Their king was called Kan Ek. He was not a warrior king. He was a thinker. He wore a jaguar skin. He spoke softly. He listened more than he talked. He ruled from a wooden palace on the island. Around him were priests, elders, and scouts. Every day, someone came with news. Smoke on the northern shore. A strange bird in the west. Men with red hats near the river. Each report was weighed. Each sign was studied. The Itza believed the world spoke in signs. A snake crossing the path meant danger. A hawk flying east meant change. A dream could warn of death. They also believed in their gods. The rain god, Chak, was still fed with offerings. The sun god, Kinich Ahau, was honored at dawn. The god of death, Apuch, was feared in the dark. The religion was not just prayer, it was memory. It tied them to the past. It gave them strength. When the two priests came in 1618, Kan Ek let them speak. He sat on a stone bench. He wore a white cloak. He did not smile. He did not frown. The priests said, "Your gods are false. Only our God can save you." Kan Ek replied, "We have lived here for many years. Our gods have protected us. Why should we change?" The priests said, "If you do not accept our God, you will go to hell." Kan Ek asked, "Where is hell?" The priests described fire, pain, darkness. Kan Ek said, "We have seen fire. We have felt pain. We have known darkness, but we are still here. Our gods have not left us. The meeting ended. No one was harmed, but no one converted. Still, the Itza were not closed. They traded with Maya who lived near Spanish towns. They bought metal tools. They got glass beads. They learned Spanish words. But they did not let Spanish people stay. No soldier, no priest, no trader. They allowed messengers, but only if they came alone. Only if they left by sunset. They also sent their own messengers. Young men who could run fast, who knew the trails, who could hide. One such man was called Sab. He was not a chief, but he was trusted. He carried news between Tayasal and other Maya groups. In 1695, he returned with urgent word. The Spanish are building boats. They are cutting trees. They are making iron nails. They are coming to the lake. Kanek called a council. The elders sat in a circle. The fire burned low. One elder said, "We must fight." Another said, "We must run." A third said, "We must talk." Kanek listened. Then he spoke. "We have survived by not being seen. Now we will be seen. We have survived by not being heard. Now we will be heard. The time of silence is ending, but we will not beg. We will not run. We will stand on our island. We will fight if we must, but we will not forget who we are." No one spoke against him. The Itza began to prepare. They sharpened spears. They made arrows. They stored food. They dug pits along the shore. They also sent a final message to the Spanish. It was carried by a young man who spoke Spanish. He found a priest in a distant town. He said, "Kan X says the Itza do not wish war, but they will not give up their land. They will not give up their gods. If the Spanish come in peace, they may speak. If they come with guns, they will be met with spears." The priest wrote the message. He sent it to Mérida. No reply came. The Spanish were already moving. Martín de Ursúa had been given full command. He was not a cruel man, but he was loyal to Spain. He believed in order. He believed in the king. He believed in one God. He had tried diplomacy before. In 1695, he sent a priest named Juan de San Buenaventura. The Itza allowed him to land, but they would not let him preach. After 10 days, they told him to leave. Ursúa was not surprised. He knew the Itza were strong in spirit, but he believed they could not resist steel and fire. So he built a plan. He would not march through the jungle. That had failed before. He would build boats, big ones, strong ones. He would cross the lake. He chose a place called Nuestra Señora de los Remedios. It was on the western shore of the lake. From there, he could launch an attack. He brought soldiers, carpenters, blacksmiths, priests. He cut down trees. He made planks. He forged nails. The work took months. The jungle was hot. The rain fell every day. Men got sick. Some died. But Ursúa did not stop. By early 1697, 3 boats were ready. They were called bergantines. They had sails. They had decks. They had cannons. On one boat, a cross was painted in red. On another, the flag of Spain. On the third, a statue of the Virgin Mary. Ursúa stood on the shore. He looked at the island. It was far. It was quiet. He said, "This ends now." The boats launched. It was March of 1697. The last battle for Tayasal had begun. The boats moved slowly across the lake. The water was calm. The wind was weak. The sun rose behind them. Martin de Ursua stood on the lead boat. He wore a steel helmet. He held the sword. He did not speak. Behind him, 50 soldiers sat with guns. They were tired. They were wet. But they were ready. On the island, the Itza saw them come. Guards blew conch shells. Fires were lit. Men ran to the walls. Can Ek stood on the highest point. He wore his jaguar skin. He held the staff carved with snakes. He did not shout. He did not cry. He watched. The boats came closer. When they were near, a voice called from the shore. Can Ek, we come in peace. We wish to speak. It was a Maya man who worked for the Spanish. He spoke Itzael. Can Ek stepped forward. We hear you, he said, but we do not trust you. The man said, lay down your weapons. Let us talk. Can Ek looked at the boats. He saw the cannons. He saw the soldiers. He said, if you come in peace, come alone. No guns, no armor. The man turned to Ursua. He repeated the words. Ursua shook his head. No, he said. We come with power. They must obey. He gave the order. The cannons fired. The sound was loud. Smoke filled the air. Stones flew. A wall cracked. People fell. The Itza did not run. They threw spears. They shot arrows. They shouted. But the Spanish had guns. They landed on the shore. They fought hand to hand. The Itza were brave, but they had no metal armor. Their spears broke on steel. Can Ek did not flee. He fought with a knife. He killed one soldier, then another. But a bullet struck his leg, and he fell. Soldiers grabbed him. They tied his hands. The fighting lasted less than 2 hours. By noon, the island was taken. The Spanish raised their flag. Ursua stood in the center of the town. He looked around. He saw temples. He saw homes. He saw altars. He pointed to the largest temple. Burn it, he said. Priests carried torches. They set fire to the wooden roof. The flames rose. The statues inside were destroyed. They found books. They burned them. They found idols. They smashed them. They told the people to kneel. Most did not. Some did. Can Ek was brought forward. His leg was bleeding. His face was calm. Ursua said, you are now under the rule of the King of Spain. You will worship the true God. You will live in peace. Can Ek said nothing. He was taken to a boat. He was sent to Merida. He never returned. The people of Tayasal were moved. They were taken to a new town on the shore. It was called San Jose de los Petenes. They were given new names. They were baptized. But in their hearts, they remembered. They still spoke Itzael. They still told old stories. They still looked at the lake and saw their island. The Spanish declared victory. They said the last Maya kingdom had fallen. They said the age of the Itza was over. But they were wrong. The Itza were not gone. They were changed. They were silent again, but they were still there.